The ship came out of hyperspace like a wounded animal. Its hull was burned black in places, and one of its engines sputtered with dying light. The name painted on its side had almost melted away. But you could still read it if you looked hard enough. Dandelion seed. Inside, 2,000 humans waited in silence. They had not spoken much during the 3-week journey. There was nothing left to say. Earth was gone. They had watched it burn from orbit, helpless, crying, holding each other as their home became ash and fire. Kang Do-yeon stood near a small window, looking out at the massive station ahead. It was called Threshold, a processing center where the Galactic Coalition sorted refugees from across the stars. The station was shaped like a wheel, spinning slowly against the blackness of space. Lights blinked along its surface like cold stars. Do-yeon was 34 years old. He had been a high school physics teacher in Busan. He had taught teenagers about gravity and light, and the beautiful mathematics that held the universe together. Now, he carried only a worn bag with lesson plans inside. He did not know why he had kept them. Perhaps because they were the last piece of his old life. Perhaps because throwing them away felt like admitting that life was truly over. The ship docked with a heavy clang. The doors opened, and cold air rushed in. Aliens in gray uniforms stood waiting. They were Velkari, tall beings with 4 arms and skin like polished stone. Their faces showed no emotion as they watched the humans stumble out. "Form lines," one of them called out. Its voice was flat, translated through a small device on its chest. "You will be processed. Do not resist. Do not argue. Cooperation will make this faster." Do-yeon joined a line. Around him, humans moved like ghosts. Children cried quietly. Old people leaned on younger ones. Everyone looked tired. Everyone looked broken. The line moved slowly. At the front, each person stood before a Velkari officer, who scanned them with a small device. The device read their implants. The tiny chips that all humans had received when they first made contact with alien species 20 years ago. The implants held basic information: name, age, skills. Medical history. Do-hyun watched the people ahead of him get sorted. A former soldier was marked as military asset and sent to the left. A doctor was marked as medical specialist and sent to the right. Most people, though, received the same classification: civilian. They were sent straight ahead toward a large gray door that led to unknown places. When Do-yeon reached the front, the Velkari officer barely looked at him. The officer's name, according to the tag on his uniform, was Thesik. He scanned Do-yeon's implant and read the results on his screen. Kang Do-yeon, age 34, occupation, educator, secondary level, no military training, no specialized technical skills, no medical certification. Thesik finally glanced up. His eyes were like black glass. Classification, civilian. Combat value, negligible. Recommended assignment, labor pool, tier 6. Do-yeon said nothing. What was there to say? He was not a soldier. He was not a scientist. He was a man who had spent his life explaining physics to teenagers who mostly wanted to look at their phones. Base 7, Thesik said. Next, Do-yeon walked toward the gray door. Behind him, he heard Thesik processing the next person, then the next. The words were always the same: civilian, negligible. Labor pool beyond the gray door was a waiting area, filled with plastic chairs and harsh white light. Hundreds of humans sat there waiting for transport to wherever the coalition had decided to send them. Do-yeon found an empty seat and sat down heavily. A young woman sat next to him. She was maybe 28, with short hair and tired eyes. A bandage was wrapped around her left hand. "Yoon Jisoo," she said, offering her uninjured hand. "I was a paramedic. Emergency response." Do-yeon shook her hand. Kang Do-yeon, teacher. Physics. Jisoo laughed softly. It was not a happy sound. "They marked me as civilian too. Apparently, paramedic does not count as medical specialist. You need a full medical degree for that." She looked at her bandaged hand. "I pulled a child from a burning building during the evacuation. I kept 17 people alive during the journey here. But I am just a civilian. I taught teenagers about thermodynamics, Doyon said. I think civilian is accurate for me. Maybe. Jisoo looked at him with strange intensity. But I watched you during the journey. When the water recycler broke, you were the one who figured out how to fix it. When people were panicking, you were the one who calmed them down. You explained things. You helped them understand. Doyon shrugged. That is just teaching. That is more than most people can do. Before Doyon could respond, a transport shuttle was announced. They were being sent to a place called Korath 7, a mining station in the Outer Rim. The Coalition needed workers to extract rare ore from asteroids. The work was hard and the conditions were harsh, but it was work. It was survival. As they walked toward the shuttle, Doyen overheard two Valkyrie officers talking. They did not bother to lower their voices. Perhaps they thought humans could not understand, or perhaps they simply did not care. Another batch of humans once said, "How long do you think these ones will last?" "A year, maybe 2, the other replied. "They are soft. No natural armor, no venom, no telepathy. They break easily. Pity about their planet. But these things happen. Weak species do not survive. At least they can dig or... That is something." The first officer laughed. Barely. Doyon kept walking. He did not look at the officers. He did not say anything. His face remained calm, but something shifted inside him. A small spark, buried deep beneath the grief and exhaustion. He had heard people underestimate humans before. He had heard people call them weak, soft, limited. And maybe they were right. Humans had no claws, no scales, no psychic powers. They were small and fragile compared to most species in the galaxy. But Doyen remembered something he had taught his students many times. The universe did not care about strength. It cared about adaptation. It cared about persistence. It cared about the ability to see problems from new angles and find solutions that others missed. Humans had survived ice ages. They had survived plagues. They had survived wars and famines and disasters that should have ended them 1,000 times over. They had lost Earth, but they had not lost themselves. Doyong boarded the shuttle. He found a seat next to Jisoo, through the window. He watched Threshold grow smaller as they flew toward their new life. He was a civilian. He had negligible combat value. He was assigned to the lowest tier of the labor pool. But he was also a teacher. And teachers knew something that soldiers and specialists sometimes forgot. Every person had potential. Every situation had possibilities. Every problem had a solution. If you looked hard enough, the shuttle flew on toward Korath 7. Doyen closed his eyes and rested. He would need his strength for what came next. Whatever that was, he would face it. Not as a warrior. Not as a hero. Just as a teacher who refused to stop teaching, even when there were no classrooms left, that would have to be enough. 6 months passed on Korath 7, and every day felt the same. Duhaeon woke at 0500 station time. He ate a bland meal of nutrient paste that tasted like nothing. He walked through gray metal corridors to the ore processing facility. He worked for 12 hours, operating machines that crushed and refined the strange crystals pulled from nearby asteroids. Then he ate another bland meal, slept for 6 hours, and did it all again. The station was not cruel, exactly. The Coalition provided food, shelter, and medical care. But it was clear that humans were not valued here. They were bodies. They were labor. They filled a function, nothing more. The Molteri ran the station. They were massive creatures, nearly 3 meters tall, with thick gray skin and 4 powerful arms. They were engineers by nature, builders and makers who took pride in their machines. The chief engineer was named Gravik, and he rarely spoke to humans except to give orders. Doyon did not complain. Complaining would change nothing. Instead, he watched. He listened. He learned this was what teachers did. They observed patterns. They asked questions. They tried to understand how things worked. And Doyen noticed things that others missed. He noticed that the Korath ore had an unusual structure. The crystals were not random. They formed in repeating patterns like frozen music. He noticed that the refining process was wasteful, crushing the crystals in ways that destroyed much of their value. He noticed the specific frequency at which the machines vibrated when they worked, and how that frequency interacted with the crystal structures. During meal breaks, Do-Yan sketched diagrams on scraps of food packaging. He wrote equations in the margins. He calculated resonance frequencies and harmonic patterns. His fellow workers thought he was strange, but Jisoo understood. "You're teaching yourself," she said one day, watching him draw. "Even here, you cannot stop." "Physics does not care where you are," Do-Yan replied. "The universe follows the same rules everywhere. If I understand the rules, I understand the universe. Does that help?" Understanding. Do-Yan thought about it. Sometimes. Sometimes understanding is all you have. 7 months after their arrival, the disaster came. It started with a sound, a deep vibration that Do-Yan felt in his bones before he heard it with his ears. The ore processors were humming at the wrong frequency. The crystals in the main refinery were resonating in a way they should not have been. Alarms began to scream. Red lights flashed. Workers ran in all directions, not knowing where to go or what to do. Do-Yan stood still. He closed his eyes and listened to the vibration. He felt its rhythm, its pattern, and he understood what was happening. A resonance cascade. The crystals in the refinery were vibrating at a frequency that made them stronger instead of weaker. Each vibration added to the next, building and building like a wave that grows larger with each pass. If it continued, the crystals would tear themselves apart. The explosion would destroy the entire station. He ran to the main control room. Moultrie engineers were there, shouting at each other, trying to find a solution. Gravik stood in the center, his forearms working different controls at once. His face showed something Do-Yan had never seen on a Moultrie before: fear. Shut down the processors. One engineer yelled, "Cannot!" Another shouted back, "The resonance is self-sustaining now. Shutting down will make it worse." "Then what do we do?" No one answered. The vibration grew stronger. The floor began to shake. Do-Hyun pushed through the crowd. A Moultrie guard tried to stop him, but he dodged past. He reached Gravik and held up his diagram, drawn on a torn piece of food packaging. "Counter-resonance," he said. His voice was calm. "You need to invert the frequency. Create a wave that cancels the original vibration. It is basic wave physics." Gravik stared at him. The chief engineer's eyes were wide with confusion. "You are human, civilian, labor tier. How do you know this?" "I was a teacher. I taught physics. This is wave interference. I've explained it to 15-year-olds 100 times. Do-Yan pointed to a specific control panel. "Your secondary processors. You can use them to generate a counter frequency. Here are the calculations." Gravik looked at the diagram. His eyes moved across the equations. For a long moment, he said nothing. The station shook harder. Metal groaned. Somewhere distant, something cracked. "Do it," Gravik said. The engineers moved. They followed Do-Yan's diagram, adjusting the secondary processors to generate a new frequency. The counterwave spread through the refinery, meeting the dangerous resonance. For a terrible second, nothing happened. The vibration seemed to grow even stronger then. Slowly, it began to fade. The shaking decreased. The alarms stopped screaming. The red lights turned yellow, then green dot silence fell over the control room. The Moultrie engineers looked at each other, then at Do-Yan. Gravik approached him slowly. "You saved the station," Gravik said. "You, a human civilian, saved 4,000 lives with a diagram drawn on garbage?" Do-Yan shrugged. "Physics does not care about species. Resonance is resonance. I just understood the pattern." "Where did you learn this?" "University. Many years ago. I have not used these calculations since I was a student." Do-Yan paused, "But I never forgot them. Teachers remember the things they might need to teach someday." Gravik was silent for a long moment. Then he did something Do-Yan had never seen a Moultrie do. He bowed his head just slightly, in a gesture of respect. "I will remember this," Gravik said. "I will remember you, Kang Doyun." That night, Doyun returned to his quarters. Jisoo was waiting for him. She had heard what happened, like everyone on the station. "The labor tier physicist," she said, smiling. "The man with negligible combat value. I just solved a problem. Anyone could have done it, but no one else did. No one else saw what you saw." Jisoo sat beside him. "You know what I think? I think the coalition does not understand what civilians are. They think it means useless. They think it means nothing. Maybe they are right. Maybe I just got lucky. Maybe." Jisoo looked at him with the same intense expression she had worn on their first day. "Or maybe being a civilian does not mean what they think it means. Maybe it just means we contribute differently." Somewhere in the station's computer system, a notification was generated. Gravik had filed a report about the incident. In that report, he had written a single line about Doyon. Asterisk, the human civilian solved it. I do not understand how asterisk the report traveled through coalition networks. Most people ignored it, but somewhere, a minor bureaucrat read it and added a note to Doyon's file. Asterisk, anomalous problem-solving capability. Recommend observation. Asterisk, Doyon did not know about this note. He did not know that anyone was watching. He simply went back to work the next day, processing or eating bland meals, sketching diagrams during his breaks. He was still a civilian. His classification had not changed. But something else had shifted. Something small and quiet that would grow larger with time. The universe had noticed Kang Doyun, and the universe was paying attention. The attack came without warning. Doyun was eating his morning meal when the first explosion shook the station. The lights flickered. Alarms screamed to life. A voice crackled over the speakers, cold and mechanical. "Alert. Station Korath 7 is under attack. All personnel report to emergency stations." This is not a drill. The Vreth. Dominion had found them. Doyon knew about the Vreth. Everyone in Coalition space knew about them. They were an aggressive empire that expanded by taking what they wanted. They were tall, insect-like beings with hard shells and sharp claws. They communicated through chemical signals, working together like a hive mind. And they did not take prisoners from species they considered inferior. Humans were very inferior in their eyes. The station shook again. Doyon ran through the corridors, pushing past panicking workers. He found Jisoo in the medical bay, already preparing for casualties. "How bad is it?" he asked. "Bad?" Her face was pale but focused. "Their ships have surrounded us. They are sending boarding parties. Coalition military response is 12 hours away." 12 hours. Doyon felt cold. "We cannot survive 12 hours against the Vreth. The station commander thinks the same. He has ordered all civilians to shelter in the deep sections. Hide in hope." Doyon looked around. He saw fear in every face. He saw people who had already given up, who believed they were going to die. He saw children crying and parents trying to comfort them with lies. Something inside him refused to accept this. "No," he said. Jisoo looked at him. "No, we are not going to hide in hope. That is not a plan. That is giving up." Doyon's mind was racing, pieces of information connecting like puzzle parts. The Vreth want the ore. They will search the entire station. Hiding will only delay the end. We need a different approach. What approach? We are civilians. We have no weapons, no training, no soldiers. We have something better. Doyon grabbed her arm. We have minds. We have skills. We have 200 humans who learn to survive on a dying planet. The Vreth have never faced anything like us. He gathered the humans in a cargo bay deep in the station. 200 people, all marked as civilians, all considered worthless by coalition standards. They were frightened. They were confused. But they listened when Doyon spoke. "We cannot fight the Vreth in direct combat," he said. "They are stronger, faster, and better armed. If we try to fight them like soldiers, we will die." Murmurs of despair spread through the crowd. "But we are not soldiers," Doyon continued. "We do not have to fight like soldiers. We have to fight like humans. A young woman stepped forward. Her name was Kim Yoonji, and she had been a chemistry student before Earth fell. What does that mean? Fight like humans? It means we use what we know. Every person here has skills, knowledge, experience, things the Vreth do not expect. Doyon looked around the room. Who here knows this station's layout? Who knows the maintenance tunnels? Who knows chemistry? Engineering? Medicine? Communication systems? Hands rose slowly. One by one, people began to speak. Bae Soon-ho, a former logistics manager, knew the station's supply routes better than anyone. He had memorized every tunnel, every shortcut, every hidden passage during his months of work. Kim Yoonji remembered enough chemistry to create compounds that would clog the Vreth's breathing tubes. She could make the air itself into a weapon. Oh, Taiwan, the old farmer, understood ventilation systems from years of working with greenhouses. He could control where air flowed and where it did not. Choi Murray had been an architect. She saw the station as a structure, a thing of walls and corridors that could be shaped to trap enemies, and Jisoo, the paramedic with bandaged hands, knew how to keep people alive under impossible conditions. Doyon listened to each person. He asked questions. He drew connections, and slowly a plan formed. We will not fight them, he said. We will make this station impossible to take. They worked fast. The Vreth boarding parties were already inside, moving through the upper levels. Station security fought back, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. The aliens advanced steadily, killing everyone they found. But the humans were not where the Vreth expected them to be. Soon-ho led groups of non-human civilians through maintenance tunnels the Vreth did not know existed. He moved hundreds of people to safety without the enemy ever seeing them. Yoonji and her team created chemical mixtures from mining supplies. When Vreth soldiers entered certain corridors, they found the air thick with particles that clogged their breathing membranes. They retreated, choking and confused. Taiwan controlled the ventilation system, directing clean air to Allied positions and contaminated air to enemy locations. The Vreth could not understand why some areas were safe and others were deadly. Murray sealed off corridors, creating choke points where small groups of defenders could hold back larger forces. She turned the station into a maze that only humans could navigate. And in the medical bay, Jisoo defended her patients. When Vreth soldiers broke through the door, she met them with a surgical laser and complete disregard for her own safety. She was not a fighter. She had no training. But she refused to let her patients die. A plasma bolt hit her shoulder. The pain was blinding. She kept working. Doyon moved between all of them, coordinating, adjusting, solving problems as they appeared. He did not give orders like a general. He asked questions like a teacher. What do you need? What is the obstacle? What have we not tried? The Vreth advance slowed, then stopped, then began to reverse. They had expected weak civilians who would die easily. They found something else entirely. They found humans who refused to accept the rules of the game. Humans who changed the game itself. When Commander Thesik watched the battle from the command center, he could not believe what he was seeing. The same humans he had marked as worthless were destroying an invasion force, not through strength or firepower, but through creativity and cooperation. Impossible, he whispered. They are civilians. They have no combat value. Gravik stood beside him, watching the same screens. The Moultrie chief engineer said nothing, but there was a look in his eyes that might have been respect. The coalition military arrived 11 hours later. They expected to find a station full of corpses. They found a station still standing, 90% of civilians alive, and Vreth boarding parties in full retreat. Admiral Rovectus reviewed the battle footage personally. She watched a human teacher organize a defense that should have been impossible. She watched civilians fight with chemistry and architecture in maintenance tunnels. Instead of weapons, she accessed Doyon's file. Classification, civilian. Combat value, negligible. She did not change the classification, but she added a single note that would echo through history. Asterisk classification. Accurate, Performance. Unprecedented asterisk in the medical bay. Jisoo lay in a recovery bed. Her shoulder was bandaged, her body exhausted. Doyen sat beside her.
"We did it,"
she said. "We survived. We did more than survive." Doyen looked at his hands, still trembling from the adrenaline. "We proved something." "What did we prove?" Doyen thought about it for a long moment. "That civilian does not mean helpless. That ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they work together." Paused. "That being human is enough." Jisoo smiled weakly. "The teacher learned something today." "Teachers are always learning," Dojan replied. "That is the secret no one tells you. We never stop being students." Outside, the coalition ships patrolled the perimeter. The Vreth were gone. The station was safe, and somewhere in the vast bureaucracy of the Galactic Coalition, reports were being filed. Stories were being told. A reputation was beginning to form. The humans of Korath 7 were still classified as civilians, but the word was starting to mean something different. 3 years passed, and the stories traveled faster than Starship. The survivors of the Dandelion Seed had scattered across Coalition space. They were still civilians, still assigned to labor pools and support roles. The bureaucracy had not changed their classifications, but wherever they went, strange things happened. On Research Station, Thel-4, a woman named Park Yuna worked in a laboratory. She cleaned equipment and organized supplies. Her file said she was civilian scientific support, the lowest rank in the research hierarchy. What the file did not say was that Yuna had been an astrophysicist on Earth, one of the best in her field. The Velkari mathematicians on Thel-4 had spent 40 years trying to solve a problem with faster-than-light calculations. Their equations were elegant and beautiful, but they did not work. Ships kept arriving milliseconds off target, sometimes fatally. Yuna watched them struggle. She said nothing for months. She was just a cleaner. Who would listen to a cleaner? But one night, alone in the empty lab, she looked at their equations, and she saw what they could not see. Their math was too perfect, too clean. The universe was not clean. It was messy, chaotic, full of tiny imperfections that added up to big problems. The Velkari had built equations for an ideal universe. Yuna built equations for the real one. Her solution was crude. The Velkari called it ugly, inelegant, a brute force approach that offended their mathematical sensibilities. It also worked perfectly. Ships started arriving exactly on target. Lives were saved. Yuna received a small bonus and a note in her file that read, "Demonstrated unexpected aptitude for theoretical mathematics." Her classification remained civilian on the agricultural world of Harvest 9. An old man named O Taiwan worked in the fields. The Nethkai who ran the farms did not understand him. He kept suggesting strange things, like letting some fields rest without planting, like mixing different crops together instead of growing them separately, like putting insects in the soil instead of killing them. The Nethkai had farmed for 10,000 years. They knew what they were doing. They ignored the old human. Then the third harvest in a row failed. The soil was exhausted. Nutrients were gone. The crops withered and died despite perfect weather and careful tending. In desperation, the Nethkai tried Taiwan's methods. They let fields rest. They mixed crops. They introduced insects that broke down waste and returned nutrients to the soil. The next harvest was 30% larger than any in recorded history. Taiwan just smiled when they asked him how he knew. "On Earth, we learned these things long ago. We had to. Our planet could not support us otherwise." He shrugged. "I am just a farmer. This is what farmers know." On the border station Sentinel-12, an architect named Choi Murray worked in the construction department. She was assigned to repair walls and fix broken panels. Simple work. Civilian work. But when she looked at Sentinel-12, she did not see walls and panels. She saw a structure designed by people who did not understand how attacks actually worked. She saw corridors that were too wide, defensive positions that were too exposed, evacuation routes that led nowhere useful. She spent her free time drawing redesigns, better layout, smarter structures. She showed them to her supervisor, a military engineer who glanced at them briefly and filed them away. 2 weeks later, raiders attacked the station in the chaos. Someone remembered the human architect's drawings. They implemented her changes during the battle itself, sealing corridors and creating new defensive positions even as the fighting continued. The station held. Casualties were 12% instead of the projected 60%. Murray received no medal, no promotion, no official recognition. But the military engineer who had filed away her drawings sent a message to every station commander in the sector. Asterisk, if you have human civilians, ask them what they see. You may be surprised. Asterisk and Doyan, the physics teacher who started it all, had been quietly transferred to a new role. His classification still said civilian, but his access code said something different. He was now listed as a technical consultant, free to move between departments and ask questions. He started teaching, again, not physics this time, problem solving, pattern recognition, the art of seeing connections that others missed. His students were a mix of species. Velkari mathematicians who needed to think less elegantly, military engineers who needed to consider more variables, Nethkai administrators who needed to understand that their systems were not perfect, and humans, always humans, who needed to remember that their skills had value. The classes were informal. Doyen never lectured. He asked questions instead. What do you see? What pattern do you notice? What would happen if you tried something different? Simple questions. But they changed how people thought. Word spread through unofficial channels. Engineers talked to other engineers. Scientists talked to other scientists. Station commanders shared incident reports with each other, whispering about the strange things that happened when humans were involved. Coalition intelligence analysts finally compiled a report. It was titled Human Civilian Performance Assessment, Anomalies and Patterns. The report was dry and bureaucratic, full of statistics and charts. But its conclusion was remarkable. Asterisk human civilians demonstrate adaptive capability exceeding all predictive models. They consistently solve problems that trained specialists cannot solve. They contribute in ways that existing classification systems cannot measure. Reclassification is recommended. Asterisk, the recommendation was denied, not because the coalition was prejudiced against humans, but because their classification system simply had no category for what humans were. They were not specialists. They were not military assets. They did not fit any existing box, so they remained civilians. And the word began to mean something new. Jisoo read the intelligence report one evening. She had become chief medical officer of a small station, promoted not because of her classification, but because she kept saving lives that should have been lost. They still do not understand, she said to Doyan over a video call. They see what we do, but they cannot explain it. Maybe there is nothing to explain. Doyan was older now, his hair showing gray at the temples. We are just humans. We adapt. We learn. We refuse to accept limits that others place on us. Is that enough? It has to be. It is all we have. The war with the Vreth Dominion had grown worse. The coalition was losing, slowly but steadily. Their rigid strategies and careful plans could not match the Vreth's adaptability. Every battle followed the same pattern. The coalition would prepare perfectly, and the Vreth would find a way around their preparations. Admiral Rovectus watched the war reports with growing frustration. She had commanded fleets for 60 years. She had won more battles than most species had fought. But she could not find a way to defeat an enemy that refused to follow rules. Then she remembered a note she had written 3 years ago. A note attached to the file of a human physics teacher who had defended a mining station with chemistry and maintenance tunnels. Asterisk classification. Accurate. Performance. Unprecedented. Asterisk. She pulled up the files of every human from the Dandelion Seed. She read report after report of impossible achievements by people marked as worthless. She saw the pattern that her own analysts had seen, but could not explain, and she made a decision that would change the war. She sent a message to every station, commander in Coalition space. Asterisk, locate all human civilians from the vessel. Dandelion Seed. Prepare them for transport to Unity Prime. I have questions that need answers. Asterisk. The message reached Do-Yan on a quiet evening. He read it twice, not quite believing what he saw. They want us, he told Jisoo. The Admiral wants us at the capital. Do-Yan looked at the message again. At the bottom, in small text, Admiral Vectis had added a personal note. Asterisk. I have seen what your people can do. I want to know, can you do it again? Can you do it bigger? Asterisk, I think, Do-Yan said slowly. They want us to help them win a war. We are civilians. Yes. Do-Yan smiled, and there was something fierce in it. We are. The transport ship left the next morning. On board were 200 humans, still classified as civilians, still considered unremarkable by every official measure. They were going to prove everyone wrong. Again, Unity. Prime was the largest structure Do-Yan had ever seen. The Coalition capital station hung in space like a small moon, covered with lights and docking ports and defensive platforms. Ships of every design moved around it constantly, carrying diplomats and soldiers and supplies for the war effort. It was the heart of galactic civilization, the place where decisions were made that affected trillions of lives, and 200 human civilians had just been invited inside. Admiral Rovectis met them personally. She was Valkyrie, tall and ancient, her stone-like skin marked with the scars of countless battles. Her forearms moved with careful precision as she studied the humans standing before her. I have read your files, she said. Her voice was deep and slow. Every one of you is classified as civilian? Labor tier. Negligible value. According to our systems, you should not be here. No one spoke. The humans stood in silence, waiting. And yet, the Admiral's dark eyes moved across them. You defended a station against overwhelming force. You solved problems that stumped our best specialists. You changed how battles are fought without ever picking up a weapon. She paused. I brought you here because I need to understand. What are you? Do-Yan stepped forward. He was 53 now, his hair fully gray, his body tired from years of work, but his eyes were still sharp. We are teachers, he said. Farmers, engineers, medics, students. We are ordinary people who lost our home. Ordinary people do not do what you have done. Admiral, ordinary people do extraordinary things all the time. They just do not usually get noticed. Do-Yan met her gaze without flinching. You brought us here because you were losing the war. You want to know if we can help? The Admiral was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Yes, we are losing. The Vreth adapts faster than we can respond. Our strategies fail because they refuse to follow the patterns we expect. We have more ships, more soldiers, more resources, but we cannot win. And you think civilians can solve this? I think humans can solve this. I have seen enough to believe that. The Admiral turned and walked toward a massive display screen. Let me show you what we face. The screen lit up with maps and charts and tactical data. Do-Yan did not understand most of it, but he understood enough. The Vreth were winning through flexibility. They attacked where the Coalition was weak, retreated when the Coalition was strong, and never fought the same way twice. The Coalition, meanwhile, fought by the book. They had centuries of military doctrine, carefully refined strategies, perfect protocols for every situation. And the Vreth tore through those protocols like paper. We need a new approach, the Admiral said. Something the Vreth cannot predict. Something we have never tried before. You want us to think like humans? Do-Yan said. Yes. I want you to look at this war and tell me what you see. Not as soldiers. Not as specialists. As humans, the humans gathered in a conference room. They had been given access to all strategic data, every battle report, every analysis the Coalition had produced. It was overwhelming. It was impossible. It was exactly the kind of problem they were good at. They worked for 3 days without rest. Different groups focused on different aspects of the war, Do-yeon moved between them, asking questions, making connections, helping people see patterns they had missed. Bae Sun-ho, logistics expert, found 17 critical points in the VF supply network. Not military targets. Administrative choke points. Places where a single failure would cascade into system-wide collapse. We do not need to attack them, Sun-ho explained. We need to confuse them. False shipping orders. Delayed permits. Bureaucratic interference. Their own systems will do the damage for us. Kim Yoonji, the chemist, developed a compound that disrupted Vreth communication. The aliens coordinated through chemical signals, like insects sharing information through scent. Yoonji's compound did not harm them, but it scrambled their signals. Coordinated swarms became confused individuals. They are strongest when they work together, Yoonji said. Take away their coordination, and they become weak. Park Yuna, the mathematician, calculated new jump trajectories. The coalition avoided certain positions because their doctrine said those positions were dangerous. Yuna proved the doctrine was wrong. The Vreth expect us to be predictable, she said. These trajectories will put our ships in places they think are impossible. We can be behind them before they know we are coming. Choi Murray, the architect, redesigned defensive protocols. Instead of protecting everything equally, she prioritized civilian evacuation. Free the military from defensive duties and let them focus on offense. We have been fighting scared, Murray said. Scared of losing people? But if we protect civilians better, we can take more risks. We can be aggressive. Jisoo, the medic who had defended her patients with a surgical laser, proposed something radical. We should share our methods, she said. Not just with coalition forces. With everyone. Teach every species how to think like humans. Why? The Admiral asked. She had been listening silently. Because this is not just about winning one war, Jisoo replied. It is about changing how the coalition fights. How they think. If we keep our methods secret, they die with us. If we share them, they grow. The Admiral considered this for a long moment. Then she turned to Do-yeon. What do you say, teacher? Is this your recommendation? Do-yeon looked at his people. At the farmers and chemists and architects who had become something the galaxy had never seen. At the civilians who refused to accept their own insignificance. Yes, he said. We did not survive by hoarding knowledge. We survived by sharing it. By teaching each other. By working together. He paused. That is what humans do. That is who we are. The Battle of the Vareth Corridor came 6 months later. It was the largest engagement of the war. The Vreth had massed their fleet for a final push, confident that they would break through coalition defenses and end the conflict. They were wrong. Coalition ships appeared in positions the Vreth thought were impossible. Yuna's trajectories had worked perfectly. The enemy fleet was surrounded before they understood what was happening. Yoonji's compounds disrupted their communication. The coordinated swarm became a confused mob, unable to share information or coordinate attacks. Individual ships made individual decisions, and those decisions were often wrong. Sun-ho's bureaucratic warfare had done its work over the past months. Vreth's supply lines were in chaos. Ships ran out of fuel. Ammunition ran short. Reinforcements went to the wrong locations, and Murray's defensive. Protocols meant that coalition forces could fight without fear. Civilians were safe. Military commanders could take risks they had never taken before. The battle lasted for hours. The Vreth fleet was broken. Not destroyed, but shattered, scattered. Unable to continue the war, they requested a ceasefire the next day. The ceremony was held on Unity Prime. Admiral Rovectus stood before the humans who had made victory possible. There were medals to give, promotions to offer, reclassifications to approve. You have earned recognition, the Admiral said. The Coalition wishes to grant you military honors. Specialist designations. Whatever titles you want. She looked at Do-yeon, waiting. Do-yeon looked at his people. At Jisoo, whose shoulders still ached from a wound 3 years old. At Sun-ho and Yoonji and Yuna and Murray and all the others. at 200 humans who had changed the course of galactic history. "No," he said. "Thank you, but no." The Admiral's expression did not change. "Why?" "Because we are civilians," Doyen smiled. "We were always civilians. That was never the limitation you thought it was." Silence filled the room. Then, slowly, the Admiral nodded. "Very well," she said. "The classification stands." She turned to her aide. "Add a note to their files. All of them. Mark it as permanent." The note was simple. It would be read by historians for centuries to come. Asterisk, let it stand. "We have learned what humans mean when they say civilian. It does not mean what we thought. It means we are not soldiers, but we will not be helpless. We are not warriors, but we will not be victims. We are not weapons, but we will be solutions. When humanity came to us broken and burning, we marked them as nothing. They proved us wrong without ever needing us to admit it. The classification stands not because it is accurate, but because they have made it mean something new." Asterisk, years later, Doyen visited a processing station. A new refugee ship had arrived, survivors from a world that had fallen to disease. They stood in lines, waiting to be sorted, frightened, hopeless, ready to be marked as worthless, eh? Young alien child looked at him with curious eyes. "What are you?" the child asked. Doyen smiled. He thought of everything he had been: a teacher, a laborer, a problem solver, a coordinator, a leader who never gave orders. "I am a teacher," he said. The child tilted its head. "What do you teach?" Doyen looked at the refugees, at the frightened faces, at the people who did not yet know what they were capable of. "I teach people what they can become," he said. "When they stop believing what others tell them they are." The child did not fully understand. But somewhere in its eyes, a small spark appeared. The same spark that had appeared in Doyen's eyes years ago, when he heard Valkyrie officers laughing about how long humans would last. That spark was hope. It was defiance. It was the refusal to accept limits. It was human, and now, thanks to teachers like Doyen, it was spreading across the stars. The Galactic Coalition eventually updated their classification system. The category civilian now included a new subsection. It contained only 4 words, but they changed everything. See also, human definition. And in that definition, written by Admiral Rovectus herself, was a truth that the galaxy had finally learned. Asterisk, the absence of military training does not indicate the absence of value. Humans have taught us that ordinary people, given purpose and freedom, can accomplish extraordinary things. Their classification of civilian is not a limitation. It is a promise. Asterisk, Doyen never read that definition. He was too busy teaching, but he would have smiled if he had, because that was what teachers did. They planted seeds. They did not always see them grow, but grow they did. Always.